Again, from Executive Intelligence Review, this is from 1983, July 5th, Volume 10, number 26. I love going back into the mid and early 80s, and I've been looking for information on Switzerland because it's been on my radar. I watched a really interesting video and talked extensively about Switzerland, and there was a YouTuber, and he was saying, they are really the biggest criminals, and nobody ever talks about the Swiss, and it just seems to me that they're at the center of everything. They're the biggest criminals. And I went back to review the video, and the channel had been taken down, and I was like, damn, I mean, it was really good stuff, and I really needed it. So I went to Executive Intelligence Review, and I've been poking around. I've been looking everywhere I can, and putting together what I can find. And it seems to me that Venice is the origin, and Geneva is like the office, or like Venice is like the home, and Geneva is like going to the office. And then you have Amsterdam and London, and then you have later Washington, D.C., and then you have Rome, which I can't really... But at any rate, some people say the three centers of power are London, Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. Interesting to me that Geneva is left out of that equation, and I think Geneva figures more highly certainly than, in my estimation, than London or DC. I'm not sure how the Vatican fits in. I know you have the aristocracy, the Roman aristocracy, that the Roman noble families that have sort of their own agenda, perhaps. They have an association. They have a distinct identity. I'm not sure about the power relationship. I know by this time they're probably also intermarried. It's hard to pick them apart from one another. But certainly not enough is understood about Geneva, and I think this is by design. So again, to me, Switzerland is of course, it's as a center of power in international banking and relative to the original Venetian fondi, certainly older and certainly more powerful than either City of London or DC, I think internationally. I think I can safely say that City of London and DC are sort of like spin-offs, and I think DC is expendable, highly expendable. I'm not sure how the Vatican really fits in to the whole equation. But anyway, let's start reading. There's a lot to get into. Centuries of Swiss expertise, usury, Jacobinism, one-worldism, and dirty money. For those of you who've been following, I just did a video about one-worldism as a guiding philosophy, if you will, that connected KGB, Soviet intelligence, and British intelligence. This one-worldist philosophy was the bond that they shared. So I'm interested to see this appearing again. And dirty money, of course. Geneva's the capital of dirty money. Switzerland, in the middle of devastated Europe, came out of the war on top. the maçon Guisan de Rougemont deployment had succeeded. Who was it, of course, World War II here, who was it that was so shamelessly, in fact, in typical Calvinist or evangelical fashion, self-righteously rubbing bellies with the SS murderers and ensuring their metastasis in the post-war contemporary world? Who? It was the usurers of Geneva, Basel, and Zurich, the old military power of Bern, the Swiss patrician caste, which had been set up as a, quote, little Venice in the 16th century by Venice and Genoa, a northbound dispatching center at a time when the world's center of gravity shifted from the Mediterranean to Baltic arc to the Atlantic world. Leur Excellence du Berne, c'est Messieurs de Genève. By 1387 AD, the franchises of Geneva, the constitution of the city-state, had already legalized the pagan practice of usury, interesting, and indeed enshrined the principle of usury in the law of the land. Ditto that if any cleric or layman that be a usurer or another citizen or inhabitant of the city passes away and dies, whether testament be made or not, what goods he had at such a time that he died must not and cannot by us or our other officers, whosoever they be taken and detained, and neither because of such usury can or could a listing of such wealth be drawn out, but by the inheritor, even though he be himself a usurer, and he can take and appropriate the goods of the said dead man without incurring impediment nor difficulty of any sort. Ditto, that no one, for cause of usury, publicly done by anyone soever, bourgeois, citizen, cleric, or lay, or man or woman, may be by us or successors, or clerks or other officers, persecuted, accused, charged, or in any manner molested, nor his or her goods seized, sequestered, brought into our hands, or part confiscated, nor seize the goods, or he or she when dead, nor capture, nor in any other manner of claim. Geneva is taken here as representative of Switzerland at large, or of the patrician elites that have run that country for centuries. We will unfold the history of Geneva as a case study whose general principles obtain equally for Bern, Basel, Zurich, Lausanne. My French is really terrible. And lesser towns. It is the Swiss the Swiss system that matters, and for purposes of contemporary strategic analysis, it is the system rather than any of its individual embodiments that should be taken into account. Even before becoming the, quote, Protestant Rome, as it was to be called under John Calvin, Geneva was a center of legalized usury. While it had served as a pivot of trade and transportation during the Roman Empire for reason of its exceptional geographic position, and received the imperial dignity of city as early as 350 AD, it was under the First Burgundian Empire that Geneva first came to prominence. By 1032, it was a Holy Roman imperial city, and led a secular fight to break loose of the grip of the Counts of Savoy and the Bishop of Geneva. By the end of the 13th century, Geneva had 2,000 inhabitants and started developing an extremely successful trade fair, for which purpose it was built up by the Lombard northern Italian bankers. These are the Black Guelphs. By 1450, the commune boasted 15,000 inhabitants. The financiers of Genoa were in the process of making it a major station in their international network, which dominated world finance. Genoa's Giustiniani family, one of the top Venice-Genoa families, opened shop in 1464, as well as the Grimaldis of Genoa, now ruling Monaco, the Pazzis, and others. By then, the great humanist king of France, Louis XI, was already in a pitched battle against Geneva's gold-draining operations against the kingdom. Having been commercially beaten by the French king and held to ransom after a military defeat, Geneva signed an association, comme bourgeoisie, with Bern, then a world power in trade, banking, and military affairs, and Fribourg. But until the arrival of John Calvin, there were essentially no, quote, native Geneva bankers. It is only when the Council of the 200, the patrician families of the town, who had designed a constitutional model of oligarchical republic directly modeled on that of Venice, adopted the Reformation and called in the French Ayatollah Calvin, until then an agent provocateur against the ecumenical efforts of Erasmus of Rotterdam and his European humanist network. Interesting, here above the Council of 200, I heard somewhere, maybe someone can clarify, that this was the, is synonymous with the core of what later became known and was exposed by Dr. John Coleman as the Council of 300, which we know existed. Sometimes it's the Committee of 300. This is the Council of 200, but the Committee of 300 is based on this. Not reckless conspiracy theory. Let's say it's for real, and even Gorbachev alluded to it at one point. When he was in Mexico, he was announcing the beginning of some international program, and he said something about how he had the permission of the Committee of 300, and a lot of people didn't know what he was talking about. But I don't think the existence of the Committee of 300 needs to be questioned. I'm just pointing out that there's some speculation that it was, the Committee of 300 was kind of grouped around this Council of 200. Calvin set up a theocratic dictatorship with a feared Gestapo, accustomed to burning people at the stake, whose sole crime had been to question some trivial utterance by the Ayatollah. When the Protestants fled France to escape religious persecution, first in the 1550s and in a second wave after 1685, a new impetus was given to Geneva. Dynasties such as the Malais, the de Neuflises, the Lullin, the de la Rive, the André opened business, as well as refugees from Italy, whose family names still loom large in the Geneva caste system today. The Turrentinis, Burlamacchis, Calandrinis, and others. They engaged in extensive financial relations with northern Italian bankers and soon became their correspondents. At a time when the oligarchical masters of Venice and Genoa were transferring their wealth out of Italy and relocating the family fortunes toward the north of Europe. This was probably in response to the League of Cambrai. The 17th century saw the prosperity of a cluster of many times intermarried families: Bordier, Darien, Lombard, Odier, Mirabeau, Pictet, Lullin, Ferrier, Saladin, Boissier, Turretini, Mallet, Tronchin. Thus, Geneva was becoming the vicar of the Fondi and becoming banker to the world. Geneva was a major shareholder in the Dutch and English East India companies, in the Bank of England and the Bank of Amsterdam, and its trading arms reached out to Muscovy, Barbary, the Ottoman Empire. Under the protection of the Geneva citizenship, Protestant bankers returned in droves to Paris and established a virtual financial dictatorship. They held 3/4 of the French national debt at the death of King Louis XIV. Wow. Each patrician family had one or several members established in Paris, Lyon, Marseille, Genoa, Cadiz, London, Amsterdam. In 1750, Pictet opened shop in New Orleans. Shortly thereafter, there arose the Gallatin Bank of New York, now known under the name of Manufacturers Hanover Trust. A spiderweb of financial and intelligence contacts was established, which vastly enhanced Geneva's weight in banking, insurance, reinsurance, and colonial and maritime trade. It is Geneva that pioneered modern actuarial methods. A Pictet published in 1746, quote, an essay on the duration of human life, when it adduced the manner of determining the life annuities, both simple ones and in tontin. I don't know. I'm completely ignorant about any of these technical terms. Have to do my homework and maybe Google this document. Anyway, extremely sophisticated methods of risk spreading were developed along with advanced methods of financial looting. Geneva was skimming the wealth of nations and manipulating them into developing colonial policies on its own behalf. I think maybe this is reflected in the practices of the Bank for International Settlements that engages in fraudulent tax contracts with Western governments and is basically skimming from, I don't know, pretty much every nation that's connected to it, with at least via all the central banks, given that it is the central bank of central banks. And as far as I know, the Torlonias are the ones that oversee that bank. And it's interesting because in Basel, it's constructed like a tower, and then you have the name of this family, Torlonia, which means a lone tower. And that bank has its own police force. I think it's a sovereign entity. And it's not connected with the Swiss government, as far as I understand it. It's out of the jurisdiction of the Swiss government. Not that that would make much of a difference, but just something. Reading here, Geneva was skimming the wealth of nations, and that's what I understand. The Bank for International Settlements is up. Excuse me, God. Is up to. And manipulating them into developing colonial policies on its own behalf. Well, that's pretty colonial. if you're skimming from the central banks of the world, that's essentially establishing that colonial relationship. Thus, France developed its triangular trade in the Atlantic and its large Caribbean sugar plantations at the initiative of the Genevans, who acted through their Protestant banker and trader correspondents in Marseille, Bordeaux, Nantes, and so forth. Geneva played a prime role in the preparation, outbreak, and the unfolding of the French Revolution. This is very interesting to me because I had always thought that it was the British. Of course, it's sort of like the British were the case officers. They're like running this operation, but it's all being done because of and at the initiative of Genevan agents in London and at the behest of Geneva, as we will see. So this is new to me and this is exciting. First citizen of Geneva, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, recruited to the Venetian intelligence service during his stint as French embassy secretary in Venice, became a linchpin of the vast brainwashing operation known as the Enlightenment. Oh, I love this. Wow. So many people embrace the Enlightenment as this monumental step forward for humanity in bucking the monarchical the monarchical yoke. And in fact, it was not that at all. I thought it debased human nature, and it was actually intended to offset, to defeat, to thwart the spreading of the true spirit of independence, which was, well, as the British saw it, the danger of an encroaching American philosophy and republicanism spreading, first of all, into France, given that many of the founding fathers were working with the French to transition from a monarchy to a constitutional monarchy, the Constitution being modeled on the American Constitution, working toward this peaceful transition, which the British found, of course, very threatening, and instead they were able to swap out or insert or replace through their intelligence networks. They were able to destroy or snuff out the American influence in France at that time that would have transformed France and then would likely have spread throughout Europe. And so the Enlightenment was that. His job was to provide rationalizations for mob violence and a fascist theory of state known as the social contract, whose best model was the Venetian Republic. So here you have, which definitely you can see now when you look at groups like Antifa and BLM, mob violence that is rationalized so successfully that even mainstream media supports and defends it. You have, to me, very strong echoes of the Enlightenment, very strong echoes of Bolshevism, very strong echoes of Maoism, and we're tracing it now back to the Enlightenment, the so-called Enlightenment, which today you could maybe, you would call it social justice, the social contract. And you have a fascist you know, by definition, what's being done is fascistic. You have the mob violence, you have fascism, you have a merging of state and corporate policy converging on the remaking of society. And what it says here, the best model was the Venetian Republic, and I'm starting to wonder if, you know, the later emergence of synarchy, where you have everything being connected with everything else, a kind of a conceptual model that now you could say, you could argue that the social credit score system is kind of the realization of a synarchist vision, and you have this kind of oligarchy. So in other words, you have a fascist oligarchy sitting at the top, and you have this kind of equality, a socialistic equality for the people on the bottom, which is also the vision of synarchy, and also what we're seeing today. And also, I think it does harken back to the Venetian Republic. So, you know, that's why I say Venice is sort of the home for everything that comes out of it, even up until today. With the plebeians thus in good hands, reading on now, Geneva sent banker Jacques Necker to become France's finance minister in 1786. Necker, yes, a Swiss banker, a real one-worldist, a real New World Order type figure. Jacques Necker finished off the king's ailing treasury by issuing an unprecedented amount of high-interest debt. When bankruptcy loomed, Necker proposed a violent, quote, austerity cure. Sound familiar? And was ousted by the king, but the mob imposed his recall in 1789. And you can only imagine, this doesn't sound like something a mob would do organically, right? Sounds like like the Jacobin mobs with their strings being pulled by Jeremy Bentham in London. We can imagine that at the same time that this is going on, the mob is being whipped up and engineered to make it seem as if there's this sort of organic demand to have Jacques Necker reinstated. It reeks of manipulation and subterfuge. Going on, a 1795 speech by one of the members of the Directoire in Paris, Cambon, provides insight into the destabilizing role of the Genevans. This is quite interesting here. Quote, "It is perhaps to the existence of these loans that we owe the commencement of the revolution. The government was squeezed and could not honor the commitments it had incurred, convened the Estates General in order to address these commitments. Portfolios were stuffed with claims against the royal treasury. The owners of these claims, fearing the loss of their capital, put on the revolutionary mask and gathered at the Amis de la République Club. Thenceforth, the Palais Royal, the residence of Philippe, Duc d'Orléans, became the place where patriots congregated, and from that hotbed arose the sacred fire that set the souls ablaze on July 14th, Bastille Day." It's really interesting to me, and you can see down from that time iterations of the ability to of, let's say, much later, the British intelligence operations that could be deployed through through brainwashing, through psychological warfare to provoke hysteria and irrationalism and mob violence. And I think, to me, when you look at Jonestown and the irrational cult movements that were spawned in the 60s and 70s in California, I think you can find connections with later iterations of these same of this kind of apparatus that we're talking about here. In one of my previous videos, I think it's called Death Cult. You can find it. It's like 3 videos ago, I think. At the end of that, I go into, well, it kind of permeates through the whole article, but the British role in building up, funding and building up and running these sort of pseudo-spiritual movements that are meant to counterbalance, or no, meant to destroy the fundamental values and principles of Judeo-Christian civilization. So we have this phrase here that, you know, the sacred fire that sets the souls ablaze. What is that when people can be provoked and they feel so passionate and committed, and it feels like the most real thing that's flowing through them, and they're ready to go off and like just do absolutely anything, and yet they're completely unaware that they've been manipulated. Absolutely terrifying. And you certainly see that in the United States today with the woke movement, and they're getting more and more hysterical, more and more violent, more and more completely just off their rockers. And it really feels real to them. No doubt about it. I don't question that they believe they're being sincere, but this is not what's going on. And you see the utility of brainwashing technology toward destabilization, as we see now. From Britain, Lord Shelburne directed the destabilization of France, and his chief aide, de Romille, was a Genevan. Mallet Dupin in London directed the British intelligence effort against France, where the ever-present archetype of corruption, Talleyrand, was paid by Geneva. In the young United States, Genevan agents such as Gallatin, Iselin, Prevost, André, and Mallet were subverting the nation, especially through its finances, as Anton Chaikin, the brilliant and incredible Anton Chaikin, has recently documented. So this is See La Campagne magazine, April 1983. In Petersburg, Russia, Delarp, scion of one of the leading families of Geneva, was an advisor to the Tsar. So now I'm interested here because now you see connections into Russia. So Geneva is connecting. So these operations that are being run out of London at the behest of Geneva, also Geneva is running the same sorts of operations in Russia. When Napoleon took power and created the Banque de France, Geneva bankers provided a majority of shareholders and the paid-in capital. The Napoleonic occupation of Switzerland was so far from harming the messieurs of Geneva that in 1815 Talleyrand could say, this is great, there are 5 continents: Europe, America, Asia, Africa, and Geneva. Geneva kept serving as one of the headquarters for the European fondi throughout the 19th century. Its families married into the oligarchies of the world. The Calvinist bankers were now assisting in the founding of larger banks. And just a note to myself, I'm appallingly ignorant about Calvinism, so I've got to do my homework there. Anyway, Switzerland was creating its Grossbanken, Swiss Bank Corporation, 1872, Union Bank of Switzerland, 1862, Credit Suisse, 1856, which were each case the amalgam of a score of fondi which sought to acquire broader financial maneuverability, which has been the goal of the fondi all along in having to relocate, to transfer their power and potential from Venice in response to the League of Cambrai. It's always been about constantly trying to acquire broader financial maneuverability. Geneva was established firmly as one of the major powers in world finance. Add the power accumulated by the private banks of Basel and Zurich, a small, sparsely populated country in the middle of the Alps, played a most significant role in world affairs. In insurance, too, Swiss giants boast leading international positions such as Winterthur, Zurich, Swiss Reinsurance, and La Ballois. To take one illustrative family case, the de Neuflieses, not quite sure how to pronounce it, whose branch of the André was trading in Genoa by 1667, was one of the major operatives for the centuries-old Genoese oligarchy's bank, the Banco di San Giorgio. Offspring were involved in the New World, one son being hanged as a spy by the Americans for managing the Benedict Arnold treason. This mishap did not prevent the family from becoming a world power in insurance, financing the leading, quote, liberal politicians of the 19th century and acquiring immense interests in colonial ventures. The bank merged in 1945 with the parvenu Protestant Bank of Schlumberger and merged again in 1966 with Mallet Frères for more than a century. De Neuflize or Neuflize had intermarried with the Mallet, creating the De Flize Mallet Schlumberger Bank. The Mallets were made barons by Denmark's King Frederick V. They ran the drug trade of the Ottoman Empire. Oh, there's a great new subject for me to dig into. The drug trade of the Ottoman Empire being run, the Malay being made barons and being given a prominent position in a very lucrative market, I'm sure, in the 19th century. Part of the family moved to Britain, where Sir Victor Mallet was Queen Victoria's secretary. The Neuflize British branch is the Earls of Bessborough. The Schlumbergers have a prominent position in Houston, Texas. Madame Dominique Schlumberger de Menille sponsored a conference of the leaders of Palestinian and Arab terrorism at her family-built Rothko Chapel in Houston, October 8, 1981. The Schlumbergers' heavy interest in the Soviet Union, there we go again, and Schlumberger chief Jean Ribot's links to the French Communist Party are not alien to that orientation. It is not only to money that the Swiss owed their worldly fortune, but, and here we go, but also to the extraordinary attention devoted by the patricians to the development of intellectual means of control and subversion of nations and populations. Let me read that again. It is not only to money that the Swiss owed their worldly fortune, but also to the extraordinary attention devoted by the patricians to the development of intellectual means of control and subversion of nations and populations. Typically, I'm thinking now, it's come up quite a lot. You see it a lot in social media. What's his name, that Russian KGB defector? Yuri Bezmenov. And he talks about subversion and these psychological means of control and subversion being carried out by KGB. And now you're saying, okay, wait a minute. No, it doesn't come from the Russians. It doesn't come from the Soviets. It's coming at the behest of Geneva through these intelligence agencies that are all connected, KGB and then British intelligence, whatever it would be back in those days, certainly way before MI6, maybe before SIS too. Typically, the role played by Germaine de Staël, daughter of Necker, in the French Revolution, and even more in the spreading the wave of mass irrationalism known as Romanticism. So perhaps this is the progenitor of the hysteria we're seeing today. It's certainly got a lot more, it's become extremely vulgar, extremely dumbed down, extremely vile. Let's see, her lying incompetent book on Germany, which was made a tremendous bestseller internationally, offered a, quote, blood and soil medievalist version of German culture, which was most instrumental in generating the anti-science, anti-culture reaction in Germany, as well as the rest of Europe. Heinrich Heine had to write a whole book in refutation of a thesis that threatened to engulf German culture in a wave of immoral, back-to-nature, romanticist bathos. Jakob Burckhardt's defense of irrationality, Ferdinand de Saussure's founding of that hideous pseudoscience linguistics to destroy classical philology, Jean Piaget's structuralist destruction of classical education indicate how the Swiss oligarchy, assigning some of its brightest sons to intellectual tasks, operates in world affairs as game masters who understand that it is ultimately the control of ideas, of cultures, and the matrices that determine culture, that determines control of nations and populations, rather than raw force, money, or ordinary power and influence. Let that soak in. For that reason, when the establishment of the League of Nations in Geneva consecrated that country's international role, the intellectual role of the country grew accordingly. The Institut Universitaire Terres de Haute Étude Internationale represents today one of the most significant centers for international policy making, or rather policy plotting. The Institute trains international civil servants in postgraduate studies while serving as a focal point for high-level think tank activities. The personality of its 25-year director, Jacques Frémond, a founding member of the Club of Rome, have to look him up, who made the Institute a hotbed of anti-growth, world federalist influences, indicates sufficiently the content of the work done there. Our old acquaintance Denis de Rougemont teaches at one of many subcenters of the Institute, the University Institute for European Studies, Europe's coordination point for federalist environmentalist ferment. De Rougemont, founder of Ecoropa and the European Cultural Foundation, is a protector of the terrorist Longo Mai communities in Europe and Central America, and a close friend of Rémy Schlumberger, who was a member of the notorious Curial network of Moscow-run terrorists. A lot to look into in that one paragraph. De Rougemont works closely with the Gottlieb Duttweiler Institute, whose founder, Swiss businessman Duttweiler, worked closely with the Abwehr networks during the war. Baron von der Heydt, in particular. In the post-war period, the Institute and its luminary Heinrich Pestalozzi have served as a major training and planning center for the European Green movement and the spreading of environmentalist ideas since the early 70s. So we're just tying up, my God, Nazis, the Green movement, the Russians. We have Albert Hoffman, the time he'd invented LSD, one of the Swiss strategists' cultural subversion tools. Certainly, no disputing it's coming out of Switzerland. Fritz Leutwiller of the Evil Bank for International Settlements, Hans Küng, Dark Ages theologian. These are the gentlemen. Very active in cultural subversion worldwide. Going on. Now, this is really interesting, especially in light of what's happening in the United States right now. It's almost overwhelming. Let me just read on. In all cases, it is hatred of America as the representative of industrial culture and a sovereign nation state that is the determinant of that ideology. Europe of the regions, quote unquote, grassroots democracy are the catchwords. Quote, there is no imperative other than that of nature. There is none from technology. Pestalozzi writes, no other imperative than that of life, and none from the economy, only of desire, and none from your profit, adds this aristocratic spokesman for the, quote, Swiss way of life. Prometheus, he explains in one of his leitmotifs, is history's, quote, worst criminal. He stole the fire of science and technology, not that of spirituality. The religion of growth and the population bomb will have to stop someday, or the cancerous proliferation of population or urban life of cities will produce disaster through massification, pollution, exhaustion of resources. Interesting because, you know, the LaRouche organization and Matthew Arrett, also a brilliant Canadian researcher, a very young guy, very energetic, very brilliant. He brings up Prometheus quite often as Prometheus representing the impulse toward innovation and the creative reason of man, as opposed to Zeus, who represents the oligarchy, and using this as a metaphor for history itself, for all known history. This has been the essential struggle. And here we have this aristocratic spokesman basically saying that Prometheus is history's worst criminal. The typical Club of Rome diatribes? Definitely. But you're reading here the ideas for whose propagation of the Club of Rome was created. De Rougemont was instrumental in the 1950 founding of the Société Européenne de Culture, SEC, a Venice-based branch of the modern Inquisition. Umberto Campagnolo, educated in Geneva at the Institut Universitaire d'Hautes Études Internationales, established as a, quote, a bridge between East and West in the thick of the Cold War. Imagine that. The SEC was the unique location where top intellectuals, scientists, and writers of East and West could engage in collective back-channel negotiations and, more importantly, long-range intellectual planning. An unpublished study by Pietro Ciccone documents the extraordinary role played by the SEC in determining the paradigm shifts in the culture accepted by the average populations of the Eastern and Western world alike in the last 30 years. So again, this is 1983. These paradigm shifts that everybody thinks just kind of happen spontaneously, like this sort of mutation in the human outlook, right? The SEC's program, as articulated in 1950, complained bitterly that the United Nations, still based on nation-states, still dependent on national governments, did not represent the powerful, radical sort of instrumentality required to establish a one-world power. What passes for modern culture, quote-unquote, has been entirely steeped in that Swiss brew. It will come as no surprise, then, that the international headquarters of the leading East-West Malthusian back-channel negotiation forum, Pugwash Conference, is located in Geneva at the Institut Universitaire de Hautes Études Internationales, under the neutral aegis provided by the Swiss. Pugwash, as documented by EIR June 7th, brought together British, American, and Russian, there you have it, policymakers committed to definitively freezing technological progress and weakening the United States. And that I'm vaguely remembering an article, it might have been actually Matthew Arrett, who discussed the differences, the essential differences. We should not necessarily equate the boom in information technology with real technological progress. Because you could certainly say, well, there's been so much technological progress, but is what we're seeing in information technology, given that it's largely functions in the capacity of a mass surveillance operation, and we see many issues in the real world being neglected. The Institut Universitaire de Hautes Études Internationales houses many more such institutions. The Centre d'études pratiques de la négociation internationale, Center for Applied International Negotiations, trains or brainwashes international civil servants that populate the offices of the United Nations. I wonder what, you know, that the colloquial expression, run a train on someone? Is there a connection here? The finance and foreign ministries of their respective countries, The Centre International d'Études Monétaires et Bancaires, International Center for Monetary and Banking Studies, serves the same purpose for central banks and private banks and experts in monetary affairs. The Institut Universitaire d'études du développement, International Institute of Development Studies, targets specifically the young elites of third world nations. The Institut International d'Études Sociales, International Institutes for Social Studies, provides the intellectual substance of the International Labour Organization. And the Association de Genève, International Association for the Study of Insurance Economics, run by Club of Rome member Orio Giardini, an associate of GIIS, is the privately formed club of the world's biggest insurance companies' board chairmen, and studies, quote, studies economic systems from the standpoint of their vulnerabilities. In other words, generates the parameters for economic warfare. In economic, monetary, and financial terms of reference, the contents of Swiss policy are clear. The Swiss National Bank, as well as the private and commercial banks, defend a policy of international triage. Question, quote, why should we save these unsalvageable bankrupt countries, these bankrupt banks? Many of us here would prefer to pull the plug and let the dust settle, one associate of National Bank Chief Fritz Leutwiler explains. Developing countries will have to adjust. It will mean a lot of pain and lowering of the standard of living. I don't know what accent I'm doing. Leutwiler? Okay, let me try again. Developing countries, it sounds a bit like Klaus Schwab, right? Developing countries will have to adjust. It will mean a lot of pain and a lowering of the standard of living, even for countries where a majority of the population is already living below the vital minimum, said Fritz Leutwiler himself, even if our own industry suffers in the process. The pure, unadulterated monetarism that governs Swiss economics is best expressed by Friedrich von Hayek, who privately advocates a financial crash as the solution to the world's ills. Because he's a student of history, he probably knows that it worked well for the Venetian bankers in the 14th century, right? Hayek founded in Switzerland the Mont Pelerin Society, which has brainwashed so many statesmen in the insipid balderdash of, quote, free market economics, while fanatically opposing the spread of industrial development and the application of the state's power to direct scientific and technological progress. Dirigism of the sort that Putin is guilty of, right? 7 years ago, this author, accompanied EIR founder Lyndon H. LaRouche Jr. to a meeting held in Basel with one Alfred Matter, then a prominent board member of the Swiss Bank Corporation. LaRouche developed the idea that the growing world debt was going to choke the world economy, provoke depression, debt defaults, and untold suffering. Matter reclined in his comfortable chair, looked to the ceiling as a good Zwinglist Basel Protestant should, and replied, "You are right, but, you know, we are not philanthropists, we are bankers." These bankers, indeed, founded the International Red Cross in the last century through banker Henri Dunant and the Freemasonic networks of the Grand Loge Alpina, and run the Red Cross as a vast intelligence operation with the best of covers. At present, the Red Cross is headed by the former deputy governor of the Swiss National Bank, Alexander Hay. They have created an immense smuggling empire, which, as Judge Sanglin of France has documented, works in smooth cooperation with the KGB. There we have it again. Right across the board, you know, from London to Geneva and into Moscow. And the intelligence services of Eastern European nations, particularly Bulgaria. We're recalling the Bulgarian connection, right? Which I've alluded to in a previous video. Smuggling in Switzerland is not illegal, since in Swiss law, it only starts once the border has been crossed, in which case it does not fall any longer within the purview of Swiss law. An Italian judge is presently investigating the role of the Union Bank of Switzerland in handling, during the war, the gold jewelry stolen by the SS from the Rome Jewish community and passed on through the Banca d'Italia as a lead into today's extraordinary Swiss-centered gold, diamond, jewelry, arms, and other smuggling operations. The Swiss bankers' priests run the Moscow-allied World Council of Churches based in Geneva, which has become an instrument of the Russian Orthodox Church ever since it joined it, a Swiss intelligence expert acknowledged. The schismatic concilium organization around heretic Swiss theologian Hans Küng, a pupil of theologian Karl Barth, who worked closely with de Rougemont, is centered in Fribourg, Switzerland. The anthroposophic World Center Rudolf Steiner's Goetheanum is based in Switzerland. The Swiss ruling elite are the chief organizers of an extraordinary amount of technological leakage from west to east, to the point that the U.S. administration decided to suspend any scientific technological cooperation with the Swiss until such leakage be brought to an end. The Swiss cooperation with Moscow is no news either. The majority of the membership of both the Menshevik and Bolshevik parties lived in Bern and Zurich under protection, just as anarchist-fascist Harold Mikhail Bakunin had half a century before, and a Swiss became the Secretary General of the Comintern in the late 1920s, who was later allowed to become, after a phony cosmetic split with Moscow, the head of the highly respectable Swiss Socialist Party. Jules Humbert Droz was a Moscow agent all along, to the full knowledge of Swiss intelligence. Business is business, and geopolitical cooperation even above business. Switzerland today, the Fourth Reich. In 1958, Dr. Albert Schäfer, whose personal connections with the Hitler entourage have been mentioned, took over the IG Farben Front Interhandel AG of Basel, renting Prince Radziwill. For the purpose, he sent the prince to his brother-in-law, Robert Kennedy, then U.S. Attorney General, and obtained a settlement of an affair that had been kept under litigation for 20 years, that of the frozen IG Farben assets in the United States. Schäfer worked in Cairo in the 1950s with Hjalmar Schacht and Nazi François Genot. Get into him another time. Schäfer was at the center of the network of post-war Nazi investment, working very closely with retired SS officer Otto Skorzeny. Schäfer was also the financial advisor to the late Shah of Iran. This is too much here. Middle Eastern networks of Swiss banks, built on centuries-old tradition of Islamology in Swiss universities, including the famous Arab studies expert J.J. Hottinger, scion of one of the major banking families of Zurich, whose descendant, a journalist at the too well-informed Neue Zürcher Zeitung, runs Swiss Middle East intelligence from Cyprus, are more than congruent with those of the Swiss-based parts of the Nazi International, which is a real thing. Notably those run through François Genot, former head of the Banque Commerciale Arabe. Switzerland is probably the Western nation with the highest density of Muslim converts among the native population. So strong is the Swiss grip on this asset that no Israeli official will dare challenge Genot and the other Swiss Arab Nazis for fear of retaliation, financial in particular, and the breakup of intelligence relations. So there you go. For those of you out there who may believe that Israel runs the world, you might want to think again. The case of Ahmed Huber, a Swiss convert and a Nazi, is illustrative. He introduced Genot to Gamal Abdel Nasser, set up with Khorassani aspects of the Egyptian missile program of the 1950s, ran part of Genot's protege Ahmed Ben Bella's security services in Algeria. My head is spinning at this point. Today, Huber is an intimate friend of Gaddafi, of Ayatollah Khomeini, just as he was a close friend of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Huber runs part of Yasser Arafat's PLO, including prominently its dissidents. Huber's world outlook, in his own words, is to maintain, quote, a Swiss lobby that will succeed in de-Americanizing Switzerland and Europe, unquote. An enterprise that offers many areas of collaboration with KGB. In fact, Huber travels to East Germany very regularly. The Center for Subversion of the Middle East, the Geneva-based Islam in the West organization, is based at the Institut Universitaire de Haute Études Internationales and recruits from the institutes based there. In close constitutional association with the Club of Rome, Islam in the West has been for years the Muslim Brotherhood's main Western support, along with the Schlumberger's Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas. Once more, the gutter-level Nazis of the Huber type and the respectable Nazis at the so-called elite level work on the same track. François Genot's close collaborator Gaston Guy Amodrouz, often tagged as the, quote, the head of the Nazi International because he heads the new European order, fascist offspring of the Malmo International, candidly expresses his world outlook. Take note, friends. Quote, there is no split between left and right wing. The system is a dictatorship of the center. It is very important to have the extremes working together to bring down the system. These are the dynamics. This is the truth of the dynamics. I should have put a close quote there. So let me read that quote again. There is no split between left and right wing. The system is a dictatorship of the center. It is very important to have the extremes working together to bring down the system. Unquote. America, he's continued in a recent, Amodrouz continued in a recent interview, quote, America is the world's main problem, the main obstacle to peace. The white man should never have gone to America. The white race should have stayed in Europe. They repressed the American Indians there. It was a brutal repression. America is the main threat to the world. The peace movement's resistance against the United States is perfectly justified. The collapse will come.